Well, hello, beautiful people, and thanks for joining me in this part 26 of this many-part series that we have titled The Journey. And today we are on chapter 26 of the book Patriarchs and Prophets. It's the first of 5 that we're reading throughout this journey. And chapter 26 is titled From the Red Sea to Sinai, which we know is the mountain where God gave us the 10 Commandments. Well, us, the people of Israel, and us, future generations. So a few things happening in this chapter. This, as the title suggests, this is the story or a summary of the story of the people of Israel from the Red Sea after the Egyptians were destroyed, after they had crossed the Red Sea, up until they reached Mount Sinai, where they camped, which is where God gave the 10 Commandments. So let's put ourselves in Israel's shoes here. They come, and let's put it in modern terms so we can maybe relate better. They come, say New York City. Say Egypt then was like New York City today. So they come from New York City, where they had food available 24/7. They had water services, electricity, they have gas. They had a mall nearby so they could go and buy stuff. They had all the commodities of life possible in Egypt. Yes, they were working a lot, but they were relatively comfortable. Now they leave Egypt and they go and are on their way to, say, West Virginia, which I lived there, not in West Virginia, I lived in Ohio, and totally no disrespect to people from Ohio and West Virginia, but there's not a lot of stuff to do there, especially if you come maybe from a city. It's mostly, mountains and green side, and there's a lot of hunting and whatnot, but needless to say, the comfiness and maybe conveniences of the city are not necessarily in those areas. And this is what we see here. Israel left Egypt, they crossed the Red Sea, and now they had nothing in front of them but dirt and heat and rocks and maybe some plants, and that's about it. So you can just imagine if you are in that situation and your faith is not strongly held to God, who, by the way, has just done all these miracles in front of you. If you're not really good at remembering stuff, your eagerness to keep moving forward is going to start vanishing and diminishing. And this is what happens. We see the people of Israel from the Red Sea up until Sinai do nothing but complain. And this is a huge test of patience for Moses. So the people of Israel start walking towards Sinai, and the first thing they encounter is that for 3 days they didn't have water. And they could not find water. And Moses, who lived in this area, by the way, before having gone back to Egypt, he knew that the nearest water pond in Mara was the name of the area. The waters were bitter. They were undrinkable. You cannot drink them. So here they are, people for 3 days thirsty. By the way, you might ask, why did God let them be thirsty? Well, we have the answer here. It says in this chapter, the Lord permitted difficulties to surround them and their supply of food to be cut short, that their hearts might turn to him who had until now been their deliverer. So they had seen how Moses prayed, God responded. Moses prayed, God responded. Moses over and over, the same pattern. God wanted, you got to remember, God is not only liberating them from Egypt, but God is also expelling Egypt out of them. They had too much of the sinfulness, of the earthliness of Egypt inside them, and God wanted to transform and make them a people to be a light for other nations. So he needs to build faith and to build trust and to build, a character in these people. And he is indeed testing them. But them, instead of learning from what they're witnessing, they just revert back to default New York City mode or Egypt mode. So God was testing them. They complained. They didn't like the water, once they reached Mara, as Moses knew, they could not drink the waters. They started complaining, oh, that we should have died in Egypt. Oh, that we should have remained there with all the comfortableness. Moses very patiently prays to God, and God said, you know what, put a tree in the waters and the waters will turn sweet. And this is what happened. So once again, the people of Israel witnessed with their own eyes that upon Moses asking God for help, God once again helped. You would think that they would learn after this one. But unfortunately, they did not. Then they start getting hungry, and they see, the food that they have been bringing with them was shorter and shortening in supplies. And it's actually quite funny what it says here. They had not as yet suffered from hunger. Their present wants were supplied, but they feared for the future. So when it came to food, they didn't even wait until they were actually hungry. While they have food in their plates and in their fridges, metaphorically, while they have food in their reserves, they were already thinking about maybe, oh man, in a month I'm going to be hungry and I don't see food around here. You know how ridiculous this sounds to some degree? They had seen God just open the Red Sea in two. They had just seen God turn bitter water into fresh, drinkable water. And now they're worried that they will be hungry in a month from now, having food on their plates because they seem to have nothing to eat in the wilderness. I don't know. I definitely think that Moses was truly a man of God to hold patience with these people. So once again, they start complaining, oh, that we should have died in Egypt. Oh, that we should have stayed there. Oh, that we should have. And God listens, and God, if Moses was patient, God was a billion times as patient with the people of Israel. So God once again comes down and tells Moses, don't worry, I will feed you. And this is where manna is introduced. Manna is bread that God sent from heaven. And manna was, bread that every morning when they will wake up, manna was scattered on the floor. It looked like white chunks of snow. And of course, they were eatable and you could cook with them and whatnot. So manna had two things. Two rules about manna. First off, they should only gather what they were going to eat, and they should not store bread for the next day. The next day, God will send more, and this was also a test of faith. God has said, I will provide you bread. So take for today, and don't worry, tomorrow there will be more. And the second rule was that on Fridays, because the Saturday was coming, on Fridays, they needed to pick double the portion for Friday and for Saturday. And two lessons here. First, once again, they needed to trust God's word. If for 6 days in a row he was going to send bread and in the seventh he said he didn't, he wasn't. So once again, a test of obedience to God. And second, it's a huge lesson when it comes to the topic of the Sabbath. A lot of people say that the Sabbath is only for the Jews, or that the Sabbath was only for Israel, that the Sabbath was instituted at Mount Sinai. And this is not true. At this point in time, Israel had not yet been to Sinai. So the Ten Commandments weren't a thing just yet. Yet we see people here, God asking them to keep the Sabbath in accordance to his law. So the Sabbath was not instituted at Sinai. The Sabbath was instituted at creation when God rested on the seventh day. So people during the weekdays, they will collect bread, and some of them didn't obey God and store bread for the next day. And you know what? The next day they found the bread was rotten and filled with worms, obviously uneatable. And then people who on Fridays didn't trust that God meant when he said on Sabbath there wasn't going to be any bread, and they only picked for Fridays, and then on Sabbath they were hungry. And once again they started complaining, and God, obviously you're not obeying what I'm asking you to do. The Sabbath is to be kept holy. And important here to note, the people obviously you know how it is. If you go to a buffet and you go get food, you might get less than what you normally eat, and then stay hungry. Others will go all in and fill the plates, and whether you picked little manna or you picked a lot of manna, the end result was the exact same. That him who had much felt like he was full. Him who picked little felt that he was also full and satisfied. So that such is the beauty of God's blessings. Even those who picked little bread and ate what one would think was little, they were still like fully satisfied, and they didn't need to eat anymore. So manna is behind us. The Sabbath story is told. It says there's a whole page here talking about how God is very serious about the Sabbath commandment, which we'll speak more about when we get to Sinai, to the story of Sinai. But once again, they leave that area. Now they had once gotten water. They had once, they had been getting manna every day. And now they leave, they continue their ways towards Sinai, and once again, they ran out of water. And instead of going in their knees and say, God, can you please provide water? They go to Moses to complain, and you know the story. Oh, if we would have died in Egypt, we had everything there, you brought us here to die. But this time, they were so convinced themselves of that nothing, was going to happen, that it says here, they, speaking about the people, question what could be Moses' object in bringing them from Egypt. Suspicion and distrust fill their hearts, and they boldly accuse him of planning to kill them and their children by privations and hardships, that he might enrich himself with their possessions. So they actually convinced themselves that Moses put himself through all of this just so he could get him out of Egypt, so he could kill them all and keep their riches. Such is so silly is the human heart when it's not aligned with God. It's not, in line with God's purposes and merits. Once again, they had seen miracle after miracle, supernatural phenomena after supernatural phenomena, and they still did not trust God. Once again, God, at this point, you will think that God will be pissed. You know how in the human terms we said third time is the, 3 times and you're out. This was the first time, at least in this chapter. If you read the Bible, I read the Bible, I've been reading the Bible again, and I this time I took note. Every time that Israel started complaining, I put a number next to it. And I think I'm in Numbers, in the book of Numbers, and I have like 11 complaints or so that we know of that are recorded. 11 times that they complained over and over. Oh, we're going to die. Oh, we don't have food. Oh, we don't have water. Oh, we don't have... Over and over. And you would think that God will lose patience this time. But once again, as the loving Father that God is, he tells Moses, don't worry. Go to the stone that was nearby. I want you to hit the stone, and when you hit it, water will come out. Of course, Moses had no power in him whatsoever. That was God himself worked through Moses to give water to the people of Israel. And once again, they see another miracle of, seeing water, having water where there was none. Last time, in last chapter, part 25, part 25, which was titled the Exodus, we talked about how Israel needed to start walking towards the Red Sea before God opened the Red Sea, meaning they had to act in faith. And once again, it says here, yet divine strength is to be combined with human effort. Why this line is here? Because as they continue after the water incident, they were attacked. They were attacked by by a local tribe. I'm blanking out. I'm trying to find here the name. I think it's the Amalekites, if I'm pronouncing that right. Yes, the Amalekites. So the Amalekites attacked Israel, and some people lost courage, but Moses obviously prayed to God. He collected an army with the help of Joshua, sent them, and this is a story that Moses had to keep the hands up while they were on the battlefield, and while his hands were up, the Israel will prevail. If obviously he grew tired and if he drops his hand, then the Amalekites will prevail. And then you have Joshua Joshua and Aaron holding the hands of Moses up so that they don't fail. And this comes with that sentence. God, divine strength is to be combined with human effort. So they didn't just pray, God, please eliminate the Amalekites and done. It was done. No, they had to go prepare for battle against them, and their effort combined with God's, that's what delivered them from the hands of the Amalekites. At this point, then the story changes, because it is the time where Israel was now near the lands where Moses had been before returning to Egypt, the house of Jethro, his father-in-law, and he meets with his family again. And his father-in-law, at this time, he sees obviously the multitude that Moses brought with him, and every single person, Moses was basically the leader of the entire camp. And this is hundreds of thousands of people, and everybody would make line every day to bring complaints to Moses so Moses could help resolve or ask God to help resolve. Jethro sees this, his father-in-law. He said, you're taking too much under your hands. You should pick men that are faithful to God to rule over tens and hundreds and thousands. So he could, split chores, and only the highest of the highest cases will be brought for Moses. And this is the basis of the justice system that we know of today. We have the Supreme Court, and then we have, courts at the local levels and like the state, and you can appeal at a higher court. This is basically the foundation in the Bible. Almost the entire justice system, just modern justice system, how we approach it, is instituted by God in the Bible, in this story. So Moses listened. Another lesson for us. Moses was, of course, a very important man to the story. And you will think that because he is at the seat where everybody's coming to him for advice, that he will be cocky to think, I don't need advice. But you see him here willingly accepting the advice that Jethro, his father-in-law, is giving to him about splitting the shores. And he self-evaluates and says, I do need the help. So it's important to be humble when we're doing God's work. And finally, they part ways and they start heading towards Sinai, and that is where the chapter ends, when they are at the base of Mount Sinai in the midst of Wonder Mountains, waiting for God's law. And that's more of that on the next chapter. Once again, thanks for joining, and until next one.